Hey everyone. So I wanted to go over a question that I get on a lot of calls that I take. Lots of people that I speak to usually want to know more or less, how much does it cost to run ads? What is an appropriate budget? And a lot of people want to know, is this something that really makes sense for me and my business? And if so, like which one would be better for my market, for the type of leads I want to get, whether they want to do Google pay-per-click or something like Facebook. And so what I like to do is kind of walk through this chart here. This is kind of just an overview of the system that I work within, but it also kind of shows the difference between outbound versus inbound. When I use this graphic, I like to go over the difference between Facebook and Google. And we have this lead motivation chart here that applies to the entire system. And if you can, please excuse my voice. It's a little bit gone just because I just got over COVID. But what I do want to do is just kind of go over, um, what should you expect if you're doing Google PPC versus if you're doing Facebook or something like that. So to kind of start with this, I like to start here with this lead motivation. This is important to understand because it's going to inform your decision about whether to do Google PPC or Facebook. So I'm sure that you've already probably heard of this idea that leads go through a process from cold to warm to hot. I add another category in here called ice cold. I learned this from a mentor of mine that I really respect, and it makes sense to me. But basically, an ice cold lead is just that they don't know that they have a pain yet. They don't know they have an issue yet that they're going to need help with, but they've also never heard of you. So this would be someone who maybe they think they can still sell their house on their own. They're not, they think that they can fix it up or something maybe, or they think they can go the traditional route still, and that they're not going to need any help to sell their house, right? They're not going to need any help from someone like you, but they've never heard of you. Whereas a cold lead, now they understand, okay. I'm not going to be able to go the traditional route of doing this through a realtor. I'm also not going to be able to sell it just on my own by fixing it up. I'm going to need some help to sell this house. I'm in a kind of a just sticky situation. So they understand that much, but then they still don't know how you can solve the problem. Whereas a warm lead, okay, so now they yes, they know they have this problem and they have this pain, but they've also interacted with you, maybe your content, maybe they've had a conversation with you, even seen one of your videos, and they understand now, okay, you can solve my problem, but they're just not ready to take action yet. Whereas a hot lead is ready to sell now. They're ready to take action, sign the contract. They know they need the help. They just want to get it done. So when you apply that to inbound marketing, and even outbound, we'll start with outbound. So this is representing outbound here. You have a list of contacts that you've pulled from the county or PropStream or batch leads or whatever you're doing to get that list. And you're doing direct mail, cold calling, text message blasts, maybe even looking at people one at a time or one by one on social media and sending them messages. I've seen that too. You have this list of leads, and they could be in any of these categories, right? Because it's just a list. It's a list of contacts that you are contacting manually to try to find out, are they a hot or warm lead, right? Are they someone who actually wants to sell? But you don't know yet, right? So that's kind of how that fits into outbound. Now, inbound, someone who is online doing inbound is really only going to be doing one of two things. They're either going to be searching for someone to sell to, and that automatically kind of puts them more towards this warm to hot end of the spectrum. Or they're just going to be scrolling through social media, scrolling through their news feed, right? Through something like Facebook, Instagram, nowadays TikTok even. And in that case, they could, again, similar to outbound, they could be in any of these categories. We just don't know. And the difference here is that when you run these advertising campaigns, you're qualifying for the right type of people, and you're going through and you're building better audiences over time as you get more and more data from running your ads. So now the question is, okay, well, what's the biggest difference between Google and Facebook? So like I said, if someone's searching on Google and they're looking for someone to sell to, in that moment, they need your service, right? In that moment, for whatever reason, they are intentionally looking for you. And so those leads, they're automatically going to be most likely in a more motivated, higher intent state, more likely more towards this end of the spectrum here, the warm to hot spectrum, which is why these leads tend to cost more money. You know, the wholesalers, people running, you know, large campaigns on Google, they understand that. They're willing to bid for those leads, you know, bid on those keywords. And so if you're going to run Google, I think Google is better if you have maybe a little bit higher budget, and you want a little bit more motivated leads. You don't want as many number of leads. You want maybe less leads but higher quality, more motivation, and you're willing to spend more per lead to get that. And what this requires is a campaign that targets the correct keywords, right? You have to get the campaign set up, obviously, and have that done properly. And then you need a landing page that converts well as well. Those are basically the two requirements for Google pay-per-click. And you want to be able to be quick to the follow-up. This is something else to consider, right? So you got to think, okay, if someone's going in and they're putting their information into Google, they're probably going to put their information into more than just one website. They're probably going to see the top sites on Google. They're going to put maybe just, they may put their information into 2 or 3 sites to get, more than one offer. So you want to be very fast to follow up. I recommend like a 2 to 5 minute follow-up policy, like try to get on the phone with them as soon as possible. But Google is also not going to require as much long-term follow-up as something like Facebook. So that is another benefit of doing Google PPC. If you're doing nationwide or multiple states, the cost per lead can become become quite reduced. It can become quite lower than it would if you're just doing one local competitive area. That's something else to keep in mind. You just have to, keep in mind, like, okay, do you really want to be trying to dispo properties statewide, right, where they may be out in the middle of nowhere? That's something to keep in mind. So with Facebook, now that you think about the other side of this, the psychology here is different, right? These are just people scrolling through their news feed. These are people that are, they're looking. They may be looking for someone to help them sell their home, but it may not be as urgent as it is on Google, right? When someone's looking on Google, it's a bit more urgent. On Facebook, they may be in that category. They could be a very hot lead. They could also be a nice cold lead. And so this is where people can tend to go wrong with Facebook, is they will start to run ads, but they won't qualify at all. They'll just run it to like a lead form, ask for name, email, phone number or something, and they won't get, they'll get a bunch of confused people clicking through the ads, and you don't want that. You need to qualify some. Once you do start to qualify, though, and you're getting some results, eventually you need to move this to a landing page. You need to start building better audiences with your ads. You need to, as you get data over time. And so it's a little bit more of a process with Facebook. The leads will be cheaper. They just may not, there's going to be less of a percentage of the leads coming from Facebook that are as motivated as you would find on Google. On Google, you're going to have a higher percentage of more motivated leads. On Facebook, you're going to have a bit more variety, which is why Facebook, you really need to be following up with those leads over time. That is the key thing with Facebook. It's great when we get, instant results. It's great when we get, really good results that first month or those first few weeks. But I tell people, and whenever you're doing marketing, make sure that you have a quarterly mindset about it, at least that you're thinking about, doing this for at least 3 months with a good enough size budget. Because, just so you think the average time from contract to close with a wholesale deal is 30 days alone. So just to figure out your kind of core KPIs, right, is going to take you a few months at least. Just because the main KPIs we look at, first of all, is cost per lead, obviously, but then we want to know the cost per contract, cost per acquisition, right? Basically the cost per deal, because that's your ROI. Okay, so now you're probably wondering, well, okay, so, which is better in which case, and what would be best to start with? And what does that kind of average ROI look like? And so what I tell people is generally, you're going to, what you want to see is a probably cost per deal around $1,000. It could be up to $2,000 per deal, but you want to kind of see it. It could be as low as $750 per deal too. It really depends on the market, but that's kind of a range. In terms of ad spend, what you want to be looking at is the are you paying someone like me to help manage this, right? If you're doing it on your own, obviously you can test at whatever budget you want. You could test on your own with Facebook. You could test on your own with a Google campaign. You could do whatever budget you think is appropriate because you're not investing in someone else to help you with it at the same time. You're just kind of doing it on your own. But if you're going to have someone help you with this and you're going to invest in that, you want to be using a budget that makes sense monthly on a monthly basis. So I would say the very low end of Facebook, if you're going to start, for example, with Facebook, I would say the very lowest amount you'd want to spend is probably $1,100 a month just for ads. Most of the people I work with are doing $50 a day, so $1,500 a month on ad spend for Facebook. And with Google pay-per-click, I recommend a higher budget. I recommend $2,000 a month. I guess you could go as low as $1,500 a month would be like the bare minimum lowest amount I would start with Google PPC. I had a client that we had tested Facebook. This was out of Phoenix, Arizona. We tested Facebook, and we were getting results, but not what we wanted at that point in time. And then we moved over to Google PPC with a $1,500 per month budget to test it out. And they got 2 properties under contract in Phoenix, Arizona, in that first month out of 10 leads. Because keep in mind, that's Phoenix, Arizona. We were getting great results, and we were getting leads at $150 per lead. Now you may think, wow, that's still really expensive. Well, I mean, it depends on how you look at it, right? Because normally leads in that area for that at that time, you're looking at $200 or more per lead. For Google pay-per-click. And so this is what I said. It can really come down to the market and, how long you've done the testing as well. So, but those are kind of just some numbers for you, right? So if you're thinking Google pay-per-click, I'd say try to commit to a $2,000 per month budget, $1,500 a month minimum just to do a test. But again, you need to give it time. With Facebook, you could go as low as $1,100 a month, I would say, but I really think $50 a day is good for Facebook at this point. Now, the other thing that I will say is that when you are doing a nationwide or multiple states, or even sometimes in multiple cities, depending on how wide of a campaign you're running, those type of campaigns can, number one, be a little bit quicker to get traction initially, especially on Facebook. And number two, they will continue to be consistent a little bit more over time. Whereas if you're doing just a single local market, depending on how competitive that market is, mind you, your campaign may just be a little bit more up and down in terms of the number of leads coming in. You'll run into what's called ad fatigue a little bit more. As this is more true, I think, of Facebook than maybe Google. But what happens basically is if you have a smaller audience size on Facebook, or if the market's highly competitive, then you'll start a campaign and you'll get some results in initially, and then that campaign will have trouble, figuring out who's the next best, lowest hanging fruit in that audience to show your ads to, because Facebook works off an algorithm. So what will happen is you'll run into ad fatigue, which is where basically the ads slow down. It starts to show it to the same people over and over again, and that will happen a little bit more often, as opposed to if you were doing statewide or multiple states or nationwide, because there's just so many more opportunities within that target market pool to keep the algorithm kind of on track for longer periods of time. So with Google, this is a similar concept. It's just with Google, it's based on search traffic, right? So this depends on the number of people coming in and actually searching for the keywords that you're targeting. So if you're targeting a much wider area, then that you're going to have more opportunities coming in through that traffic. So again, what will happen is that the cost per lead will likely go down. And so what you'll see on Google is if you're doing a nationwide campaign, you may be getting leads at about $50 a lead, as opposed to $150 to $200 a lead in some more competitive areas. On Facebook, depending, people ask, okay, well, what's the cost per lead on Facebook as opposed to Google? Well, it's going to be lower, but it really depends on how much you're qualifying, right? So if you're running your ads and you're only asking a couple questions on a lead form, you could be getting leads at $15, $20 a lead, especially if you're doing a nationwide campaign. You could be getting them as low as maybe $13 a lead, really. But you're not going to be getting as qualified leads, as opposed to if you're running them to a landing page where now you are forcing the leads to give a bit more information, and it's you put up more friction to kind of weed out people that are maybe not as motivated or to fill out the form. And so those leads will tend to, cost maybe a bit more. I would say on average, we see Facebook's probably anywhere between $15-$20 on the lower end is what I tend to see it up and up around $50-$60 a lead at the higher end. But it really varies, right? It really varies depending on, again, where you are targeting, how wide your market is, how long you've been running the ads, how much you are qualifying them, how well the campaign is performing. With Facebook, even, it can depend on the certain, what season is it, right? Is it during a holiday season when you have lots of other advertisers running all other kinds of ads and kind of increasing the costs temporarily? So there is a bit more fluctuation with Facebook, but I hope that this gives you a bit of a clearer picture on which makes more sense for you. I would say if you have a large budget and you want to scale quickly, I would go with Google. Just because Google is easier to scale fast than Facebook's a little bit slower to scale because you have to add campaigns as opposed to just increasing ad spend. But if you have a bit lower budget and you're okay with leads that are going to require a bit more longer term follow up, I would go with Facebook in that case if your budget's not as large and you're okay with having a little bit more burden on the follow up side. And having a wider variety of leads in terms of motivation, then Facebook might be good to start with. Either way, when I work with people, we set up a system to get a landing page tested out and functioning. We do all the integrations for pixels and domains and everything, and I provide a CRM to assist you with that follow up. That's kind of what this other side of this chart is here. And that's something else I can go into maybe at another time. But this is already a 16, 17 minute long video. And so, I just wanted to kind of give an idea for you to see, like, what does this look like? What would the return be? And again, to kind of reiterate, like if you're getting, let's say $1,000 per deal in terms of ad spend, and your average assignment fee is $10,000, well, that's a 10x return, on each one from your advertising. If it goes all the way up to, let's say at the higher end, like $2,000 per deal in ad spend, and your average assignment fee is $10,000. Okay, well that's still a 5x return on your advertising dollars. We'd like to see it at the lower end of that, of course. And I mean, in some cases, you could even probably get under $1,000 cost per deal, right? It just really depends on the market. It really depends on the campaign, and obviously that's going to also depend upon your ability, at sales and negotiation with the sellers. It's going to depend on how well and how consistent you are at the follow-up, and how consistent you stay, with your marketing in the long run as well. But those are kind of the averages. I would say that's kind of what I would point you to in terms of how to look at it. Feel free, always to let me know if you have any questions. Reach out. I'm happy to dive deeper into this with you if you're really kind of wanting to see more. But I just wanted to provide this so that it can kind of answer some questions that I tend to run into, with most people that I speak to regarding inbound lead generation for wholesaling to find motivated sellers. Anyways, it's the 4th of July. Have a happy 4th if you're watching this today. And other than that, take care. And hopefully I will talk to you all soon.